Welcome to the CEO and the Salesman podcast, where we interview entrepreneurs from around the world about their journeys. Today, I'm joined by Sjoerd, and Sjoerd, very great to have you here today. Let's start with how does Sharetribe start, and I guess who do you guys help?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, by the way. I didn't say that before.
An absolute pleasure.
Yeah, so Sharetribe, we help marketplace founders start their first marketplace. And when I say like marketplace, we mean these ideas like what is commonly known as the Airbnb for X ideas, where you have multiple parties on one side, multiple parties on the other side, whether it's renters or sellers. And then you build a platform where you bring them together, and then ideally you take some money of the transactions. So for those ideas, if you are a founder with that type of ideas, then we have a software available which anyone, and I truly mean anyone, can start a fully comprehensive, like fully functioning comprehensive marketplace on the web. It's like a no-code marketplace builder. But, and this is the trick, you can also extend with code if you want. So quite often these no-code platforms have some kind of technical ceiling. With us, you can expand it with code if you want. It's a set of APIs, so you can call in and out whatever data or service that you want. And after you've sort of validated your idea, you can then build it out and scale it to, whatever size you want. So we have several customers who've gone with us from the very first version to having raised like Series A, 9 million. Actually, there's one
Wow.
in Australia who they didn't start in Australia, but they expanded to Australia. So this company called Drivela, they're a car sharing platform, originated in Singapore, tested it there, and then got some funding, then moved to another country, I think, in between, and then to Australia. Now they're also in New Zealand.
Okay.
So
And
yeah,
so, what does that company do?
so they are a car sharing platform. So
Okay, so just you've got a car, and people have just they just go, well, it's available. I drive to work or I drive home. I've got it's available 8 hours a day type of thing.
exactly, yeah, because it's one of those, cars are one of those like assets that we have in our lives that are worth a lot of money. Depreciate in value really fast, and so why not make more out of that? So it's a really good idea for marketplace, so they have exactly that. And I think in Singapore, cars are even more expensive. So it was a really, really natural
Yeah.
idea for them to pursue.
Yeah, very cool. And so they grew and they raised capital. And did you say that they've exited, or the original entrepreneurs
No,
exited?
no, no. I think they're still, I can actually look it up really quickly. Oh, they started, I think, with us in 2018, something like
Okay,
that. First version, and now they have raised, and it says in the article we have like 3.2 in pre-series A, but I think they've raised their series A now in order to
fantastic.
expand to Australia because it's a slightly different scale than Singapore.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Well,
I
everybody's
don't
got
think,
cars,
yeah, yeah,
but they're having the availability to get access to. Well, not everybody's got cars, but there's lots of. We don't have the infrastructure to. It's not a walkable city. There's very few
no,
walkable cities in Australia. It's not a European
yeah,
city
no, no,
where it's
exactly,
but everybody's got to have a car, because just to get to the local shop, it's 3 or 4
yeah.
kilometers away for me, and I live in a pretty densely, I guess, populated area. So, okay, so you help people bring together, buyers and sellers, or asset holders, and people who want to use those assets. So, a few years ago, I heard about people who were doing things like swimming pools and like tennis courts. Is that type of thing as well? Do you?
100%. Actually, swimming pools, it's a good, nice that you mentioned that because that's actually one of our other sort of like, what do you call it? Like showcase customers that we like to have.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And just as a sort of illustration, also like, for example, the DriveLab founders, they're both, I think maybe one was something in finance and the other one a business consult. So they were also not coders. And the swimming pool example is a woman from France I don't know, maybe my age, a little bit older, who's also not technical, but they
Right.
have they have a business called Swimmy, and in France, it's quite common that people have their own swimming pool in the back of the garden, or not quite common, but much more common than, for example, Finland,
Sure.
where I'm from. And she just built she got this idea for this like Airbnb for swimming pools already, well, maybe also around the same time, maybe like 2017, 2018. She's a really great businesswoman though. She's really good at connecting and generating publicity, etc. So she was able to get the first version out with some help. And then same thing, like they got it to scale, they got funding to expand to the entirety of France. I think now they're in France, Spain, and several other countries in Europe, and maybe even US expansion. I'm not entirely up to date on what they're doing, but yeah, that's what they do. Like I think like that's generally like, if there's a couple of sort of pointers towards what's a good marketplace idea, like it's really those things that I said, like things that are underutilized assets that have a lot of value, that spend a lot of time just like being unused, and to, people would like to get more money out of those. So I think those are the most common ideas.
It's certainly getting on board with the current business model, which is the underutilized asset, the
Uh,
Airbnb, and as you said, the
yeah,
Uber, this
yeah,
underutilized asset. And that's how Airbnb started, wasn't it? It was just, oh, well, we've got space, and so come and crash. And
yeah.
now it's obviously a giant global billion-dollar organization. So
Uh,
what motivated the owners? And I know you're a really early, I guess, early entrepreneur employee. What motivated the business to actually get started? What was the problem they saw in the market?
yeah, but it's more of a coincidence, or not coincidence. How it started, basically, the very first version of Sharetribe. So we've had now like several attempts at this, solving the same problem. But the first attempt actually originated from like a research project here at the local technical university, and was part of a research project to make the campus more sustainable. So it started as this like lending platform already in 2010, I think, or 2011,
Right.
where local students, we're throwing a party tonight, who has a smoke machine, like, or like, hey, I need a drill, who has a drill, like
Got
that
it.
kind of thing, to just that, to make the campus more sustainable. And then when that project ended, to founders Antti and Juho, they were like, oh, this is like, we should maybe become founders and like turn this into a business.
We've
So
got
then they
something
tried to
here.
sell. Yeah, exactly. And so then they tried to sell that platform to other universities. But if you ever try to sell anything to like a higher education institution, that those sales cycles are like extremely long. It's not a great foundation to build a startup. But as they were hanging out, it was sort of like the rise of the sharing economy at the time. And so they met all these founders who had similar really cool ideas, but they all ran into this like platform problem. And that sort of triggered in their head, hey, actually we have this platform, like, why don't we sort of turn that into a sellable asset? And so I think then they built the first version, that was like went really well. It was, first version was launched, I think, maybe 2011 or 2012, which was really like, at the time, more like a WordPress or like a Squarespace for marketplaces. So like anybody who's ever started a Tumblr blog or a blog could basically use it. You just sign up, fill in your name, email address, it spun up, and then it was there, and it was like fully functional. But it had some limitations when it comes to like customization. And so you can imagine that we're a SaaS business, so we people pay us monthly, and they can also quit monthly, right? So if
Yeah.
you know the odds of starting a new business, they're not, for a company to survive over a year, their odds are very small. So we have a massive like natural churn of people for who it just doesn't work out for many reasons. Like the idea might not be so great. They run out of time, run out of interest, run out of money, like a variety of reasons. But then at the same time, there were some customers who were successful, and they needed some custom feature, which we weren't able to provide them, nor a place to like customize it for them. And so after a couple of years, like that demand from the market started becoming like, the market started demanding more. And of course, we were updating the software, but we could feel that we sort of like, for a while, that we had this like product market fit thing, where it's like, okay, this is exactly what we need, and this is the product, like the market is there. And then it's slowly started like disappearing. And this is, I mean, this is a little bit of a sort of retroactive applied logic, that like, oh, this is probably what happened. And then we built this other project, or other solution, which was way more technical, which was basically like a set of APIs with all this basic functionality that a marketplace needs, that people can sort of call into their software, which was great for people who were on there. They stayed longer, but it was much harder to get people on there, because you needed a lot more sort of technical knowledge up front to get started, because you need to build your own like web application in order to call those things in. And so for a while, for several years, we had these two products, and it was not, from a marketing perspective, it was not ideal to have to explain two products to a customer and then have them pick and choose, and it's never perfect fit. So then we decided, okay, this is not working. So we need to build a product that combines the best of both worlds, right? Like no code, easy to start, infinitely scalable and extendable. And we made this big bet that we're going to build that project, or that product. We spent,
Did you raise capital to do that?
no, actually we did not, because well, yes and no, actually. So we were originally, based on that first product, we got some like traditional VC funding. And then just around the time when like the sort of the lull in growth started to go, we realized, okay, it's going to be difficult with these numbers to raise a lot more capital. And then our investors, they were pushing us towards maybe areas we didn't want to go to, like enterprise, etc., because it was really like the founder's mission that we want to help people. Like we want to democratize the platform economy so that anybody should be able to do this. And that's not where you go to when you go down the enterprise lane. And
That's right.
so just around that time, we met this company, or this fund called Purpose Fund from Germany, and they are like a fund with a mission. They want to share this model, which is called like steward ownership, which is based on this like German model. So I think, for
Well,
example, Bosch.
I really want to get into your ownership structure, Sjoerd. Thanks for telling me about the
Yeah,
start of the business. This part of I was absolutely fascinated in our first
yeah,
conversation about because I've never heard of a structure like this. So tell us how the business is structured
yeah.
and
So
ownership side.
yeah, so this steward ownership model that they are sort of like evangelizing, and they invest in companies in order to sort of convince them to change to that model. Um, it's based on this, like in Germany, you have this sort of family business model. I'm sure you have it in other countries as well, but it's sort of more formalized there. And it's kind of based on that. And the idea is that there are companies for who the mission is sort of more important than just making the profit, right? Like if you have sort of unchecked capitalism in that way, then the purpose just becomes to generate more profit, and it might lose track from its original mission, which for some companies is not an issue. But if you are a company which has some like mission drive, then you want to sort of safeguard that the company will also, after you leave, always work towards that mission. And so there's a couple of characteristics that a steward ownership company has. One is that the mission like supersedes the need to be profitable. It says, I don't know the exact percentage, but we are sort of legally obliged to put a certain percentage of the profit back into the company in order to generate more progress towards the goal. The other thing is that the profits can be capped, or the profit, like the return on shares, has to be capped. So when we made this change to this model, we did a crowd investment round, where we raised 1.5 million euros. So we have hundreds of like smaller and bigger shareholders. Anybody could just buy in. I think the minimum was like 500 euros or something. And we have an agreement with them that in 10 years after so that's 2028, we will pay back their original investment 5 times from the profits that we generate in that time, or a similar agreement. So meaning that, because if you think about like traditional investment, then there is no cap on the return, right? Like if a venture capital investor comes in, could be 10x, could be 20x. There's no limits. Like, so all of the profit that the company could otherwise generate for itself needs to be paid back to the investors at the time of
Because a
exit.
lot of those sort of funds they make 10 bets, and knowing that one will come off, 9 will
100%.
fail. That's not really
Yeah.
terribly impactful to the VC company, but
Yeah.
to obviously the 9 people that did fail, that's a pretty emotional roller coaster. But the one person that really takes off, well, the VC's got to extract as much money out of that as possible to make up
Correct.
for all the failed ones, and still buy a McLaren.
Yeah. Yeah. No, correct. And I think there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but it's just not, it's not a model that fits all companies. And so, and then the final one is that the shareholders, or investors, they have no say in the strategic direction of the company. Only if you're a shareholder and an employee, you have a say. So the company is really owned by the employees. Like we get to determine what we do, where we're going, what is our general direction, etc., which has been really, really fantastic. Like it has really, I mean, we had a discussion about like our ambition level in the company recently, because our growth is not supersonic. Like we are sort of like a slow growth startup, probably like the world's slowest startup, I sometimes joke. But I think the ambition is really in how we do things on our own terms, which is like we never have to compromise on any of our values, whether that is in terms of hiring or our customers or how we do things. And that is really, really valuable.
Powerful.
Yeah, it's
Well, it's
super.
so powerful if you can sack a client, or you can. I've taken that position a number of times, and because it's my business, and I have, only a certain level of sense of humor when it comes to people. So I've been luckily, but I'm not held to shareholders. But when you raise capital, that becomes a completely different conversation. Oh well, you can't get rid of them. You got to do
Yeah,
this. This is the way we're going to do it. You just got to,
yeah,
and the employees become commodities of the machine, in which they just have to put up with crap
yeah,
to be able to fuel the
yeah.
machine, right?
Yeah, and I think like it has been like in retrospect, it has been a really good decision because the other thing that allows us to do is to be very transparent about how we're doing as a company, and that creates like a really sense of reliability for our customers. So we have at the moment like we power more than 1,200 marketplaces, but we're not like a complementary software, right? Like I always say that like we're not like like a CRM for car salespeople or something where their business will continue to exist even if we don't, or if we disappoint them or something. Like it will be a little bit of a pain, but they can still sell cars. While what we provide is really like, the backbone of this company, like of this business. So like without us, they wouldn't have a business. And I'm actually quite confident that for the majority of our customers, they wouldn't be able to be in business if it wasn't for our model, our software. And so we need to show them that we're reliable, that we're not, for example, a VC funded company that, like you said, like suddenly ends up on the, well, let's ignore them side of the board of the investor, not get the follow up round. And, because this is what happens like with a lot of those
All the time. Yep.
companies. Yeah. And like, especially now, like when you see the, like now that the sort of the VC, like post pandemic, it was really high for a while, and then it just went like completely dried up. And so there's lots of companies also that I see here in the local startup scene or European startup scene who were in the headlines all the time when money was everywhere, and that now like that it's when it starts to become about being profitable or being like they're just slowly dying, like, and
Well,
it's really sad.
with
Yeah,
that capital, they've built this engine that requires a lot of fuel to go in it. And whilst the
exactly. Yeah,
business might be growing, it's not growing fast enough to produce enough fuel for the engine. And so
exactly.
then if they don't get that next round of investment because they've grown very, very quickly, they're now sort of reliant on this money flow of
Yeah,
with not that's not related to revenue. And of course, if that money flow dries up, or the VC change model, or they've got one winner or they got six losers on their hand, well, they go, well, we just don't want to, because those businesses are okay, but it's not doing these
yeah.
numbers. So we'll just cut it off. And then the business is either got to figure out how to survive on its own, or in some cases, they just fall apart.
Yeah, precisely. Or the other thing that can happen is that like they work up towards an exit, so the numbers are need to be pumped up. Like we had that with an infrastructure provider ourselves for our website. I won't name them, but I'm still like super not unhappy with them. That they just literally just 10x the price. Like they just came to us like, hey, we're going to change our pricing for your use case. It was little. I'm not. This is not exaggerated. It was literally 10x. We went from like using, I don't know, something like $150 per month. It went to 1,500. And it makes
What,
sense.
per instance, or per
No,
customer?
for if no, for it was what we used to deploy our website and all our like our own
Oh, right, right,
marketing site. So
got it.
not our own infrastructure, thank God, but or not our customers' infrastructure, but our own. Um, but like and it was really, and I understand the logic. I mean, like you do it 10x. You just need 1 in 10 customers, or like a little bit over one in
To
ten
say
customers,
okay.
to agree to
Yep,
this, and then you're gonna
1.1
stay okay.
customers.
Yeah,
Yep, and
exactly.
they got
And
far,
so
and then they can halve the amount of people they have in customer service, or
$100%.
cut
Yeah,
absolutely gut customer service, and they can do all of these things, and they're making the same money, and they're servicing way fewer people.
exactly. And that all works in their model because their only point is to satisfy the shareholders and not like the customer. So that is why for us this model has been really great, because we can show to our customers like, hey, we're going to be around. Like we're profitable. We have our own, like we have our things in control. You can build your business on us. Like we're going to stick around for a long time. Whoops, shouldn't do
Yeah,
that.
that's okay.
Yeah.
So you're in marketing. You're the chief marketing officer there. How have you taken this? Whilst the business has been around since 2011, I think you said, and it's gone through a number of sort of evolutions. How are you currently going out there? And because a lot of our listeners are interested in sales and marketing, they want to grow their tech business. How are you currently growing your tech business?
Yeah. I mean, that is probably the biggest challenge that we have, because we focus on people. So, our ideal customer profile, or whatever you want to call it, is basically someone who has a new business idea, which has the mechanics or the characteristics of a two-sided platform. So that's not all business ideas. And then wants to launch it without investing too much or without coding, and then ideally has to be in a country, but it doesn't really necessarily need to be, but that comes with our integrated payment provider Stripe, just because then you get all of the value props that we have. And that
There's
is
quite a
not,
few elements
yeah,
of
yeah,
undercover marketing. I mean, my business does
Yeah,
marketing. Even though I'm a
yeah,
salesperson, my business does
yeah,
marketing, and I know enough that it's difficult to profile somebody. If some of my clients, they sell to project managers in medical business, medical legal businesses
yeah,
with these types of softwares. So
yeah,
we can talk to those problems. So how do you
exactly.
identify? How do you, because saying, well, people have got an idea. Well, who is that? Is that
Yeah,
the lady who has pools, or is it the guy in Singapore who has too many cars?
yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's a hard one to catch.
Yeah, no, that's precisely. Yeah, no, exactly. You get it completely. That is the hard thing because that's not a profile. Like you said, like this is not, coming back to the car sales example, like I can't buy a list of these people. Nobody's advertising
No,
that they are a marketplace founder prior to using our product. So
that's right. I've got an
so
idea.
yeah, yeah. No, exactly. Because lots of people do this as a side hustle, right? They are still full-time employed when they do their first version, etc. So then they don't necessarily want to advertise publicly that they are running a side hustle because that might be against their legally or like
Company might get grumpy about
yeah,
it. Yeah,
exactly. So we can't go to people directly. So we need to be wherever people show behavior that indicates that they're on this, and with behavior that can be searching, right? So we are really we've put a lot of time and effort into our content marketing and our sort of search discoverability. So we have this thing called the Marketplace Academy. This is actually a sort of like I don't know. I should really figure out what's the expression, but it's like a tool that like cuts on both sides. Like that's a multi-use tool. So this content that we do, first of all, it helps with getting discovered. So we write about anything that has to do with building marketplace, whether it's like insurance, business models, payment providers, etc. But at the same time, that same content we also use to educate our customers because, like I said, like, their odds are not great. A marketplace business is a quite particular model that, unlike, for example, SaaS business, is not written about a lot because there's not that many marketplace companies that have gone to the scale that, or there's just not that many of them in the way that there are like SaaS businesses. And so we we put a lot of time and effort into producing content like written stuff, but we also have our own podcast, actually, if I can plug that quickly, where I
go for it.
interview founders and early employees of like successful marketplace businesses. Like I've interviewed people from Kickstarter, like one of the founders from Kickstarter. I've interviewed Lenny Rizitsky, who was like early at Airbnb. I've interviewed Casey Winters, who was one of the early people at Grubhub and later went to Pinterest and Eventbrite, like really like specialists. And then I talked to them and we tried to sort of discover, okay, what makes marketplaces successful. So we do all of that content just so that if someone is looking for this information, whether that is on video, audio, or written content, we should be there. Like that's our goal. And then
Yeah,
similarly,
great.
we try to be in like communities like this. So we have a lot of agreements with incubators, accelerators, where there's just a higher likelihood of these people being around. But it's a big challenge because it's like, yeah, it's hard to scale that or to do that in a way that is like the same way that you would do, for example, paid advertising or like you said, like cold email outreach based on, we have 1,000 contacts here. Let's get them on a call like that. That doesn't work like that. So
Yeah.
it's probably our biggest challenge or one of our biggest challenges anyway. Yeah.
Got it. Well, you've got your work cut out for you. And so, with the types of partnerships, so you find partnerships are a good way to go. And like you said, you were talking about incubators before. Have you continued to drive down that line to find those people where the ideas sort of start? Are you also big in universities? Is that somewhere that you talk to?
Yeah, somewhat. Like we've been in the last couple of years because we're up because we are a steward owned. We have a limited amount of money. We're profitable, but we need to be quite efficient. So we cannot make too many bets at the same time. And so we were sort of slowly growing the operation. And initially, like I said, all of the effort was in content marketing, etc. But then, how familiar you or your audience is with Google and that kind of stuff, but they can just throw in these random algorithm updates and like, woof, like you have lost
Yep.
20%,
Absolutely.
50% of your traffic. And so we've learned over the years that we need to diversify our channels so that we're not beholden to, one monopolized channel the way Google is now. So partnerships is one of them. So it's definitely still like an area we're going to develop, but it's one that is interesting. And I think it's also just like content marketing, it's like a long-term play, right? Because for right now, all of these startups or all these incubators and accelerators are dominated by AI startup, right? Like that is just what people want now. So
That's
the
what's
odds,
hot today.
Yeah, exactly. So the odds maybe to getting a marketplace founder in that group is just smaller than it was maybe 2 years ago. But I think generally we just need to get as many people familiar with us who might know people who have a business idea.
Got
So
it. So thinking about your existing customers, thinking about the successful ones, we've talked about a couple of examples. What are the underlying characteristics that you would want to have each of your new entrepreneurs and people who try out the platform? What are the two or three things that you think they should be thinking about to be successful?
yes, I think, yeah, that's a really good question. There is like, because we've launched, we've had thousands of customers. Like we now, like I said, we now have about 1,200 live, but we've had many, many, many more. So we've launched thousands of them. I think there's a couple of things also from talking to the investors and to founders for the podcast about what people should think about to start a marketplace. I think first of all, the number one thing is like constrain the marketplace in the beginning. So make it as small as you can. So if you draw out the business of a marketplace, like there's this concept in marketplace which is called liquidity. It's like the likelihood that a seller is able to sell something and a buyer is able to find something that they want. So whether that is rental or service doesn't really matter. And so essentially you can divide up the marketplace in like sort of this matrix where on the one hand you have like location, and on the other hand you have like the categories of the things that they're selling. And for each of those, so for example, if you think about the drive-like example with the cars, or like if you take it to Australia, like you on the one hand you would have the Australian cities, and on the other hand you have like the type of car. So whether that's like small car, big car, SUV, whatever. Each of those, so you end up with this matrix, all these little squares. So Sydney small car, Sydney big car, Sydney SUV. And for each of those little squares, you need to have a reasonable amount of both demand and supply. And so you
Yes.
can imagine like the bigger that the more categories or the more locations you add, the more work you have in the beginning, because there's no, if you happen to have an incoming search from, I don't know, Melbourne, and you have only supply available in Sydney, your marketplace doesn't work. And so the bigger you make it, the more squares you need to fill. And that is something that I see marketplace founders do wrong again and again, that they're just not, because you don't, if you're a founder, you need to be sort of irrationally optimistic, right? So you always want to go like go big, but it requires a lot of discipline to make it actually smaller, and that actually, no, my marketplace is just for this one, neighborhood of Sydney doing
Right.
food or something like that. So I think that's the one, because it's impossible to get that little engine up and running if you have too many squares. And on the other side is that you will probably discover like 80% of the things that are wrong with your idea just by having one square. And so I think that's my
Mm.
advice. Like start as small as possible. Like there's many, this guy called Andrew Chen, who's investor at Andreessen Horowitz, was one of the early people at Airbnb, has written this great book called The Cold Start Problem. And he talks about this, like what to find the atomic network, which is like truly like for example, Uber, they started at this like corner of a metro station in San Francisco. I think like that
Yep.
was their original square, and there's, okay,
Yep.
we need enough riders and enough people needing a thing in that square. And then we have something. And then once you find that, you start expanding the squares. Once you figure out how to fill a square like that, then you can start adding.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's like I think Reid Hoffman talks about do the unscalable in
Yeah.
the early
No.
stages. What's the minimum thing you can do? What's the unscalable? Like the Airbnb guys, they literally were told by their early stage investors that whilst they're in California, most
Yeah.
of their Airbnb people were in New York. So what they did is they said, well, and what's happening? Well, we're not getting enough people. What's the problem? Well, look, these photos aren't great. The descriptions aren't great. It could be better.
Mhm.
He said,
Mhm.
cool. Here's a camera. Get on the plane. Go take some nice photos. Sit down, have a coffee with your host, and you write you write it. Oh, that's not very scalable. They
Yeah.
complained. He said,
Yeah.
we're here to do tech things. That's cool.
Yeah.
But if that's stopping you from actually making a sale, then you got to go fix that problem. And they
Yeah.
literally would fly out to New York and sit down with these people in these 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom apartments. And, where are we going to lay out because it was actually just an airbed, because
Yeah.
Airbnb was
Yeah.
airbed.
Yeah.
They go, well, put the
Yeah.
airbed there, take
Yeah.
a photo of it, and get a photo of this and that and the other, and tidy up the kitchen before you take a photo of it. Like really, really small stuff. So
Yeah.
I really love that
Yeah.
bit of advice to do do the unscalable, or as you point, what's the smallest geographical market if we're doing geography, or what's the smallest sample we can take? Because you could disappoint far fewer people.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the other
Yeah.
thing is that I think, and maybe that's, you ask for top three, but this was just one, but maybe one I can add one more, and not completely unrelated to what you said, is that I think the other thing that founders do, I think could do better a lot, or what I see people do, is that they wait too long with getting the first version out, because, oh no, I need to have this, it need to have this feature. No, actually I need to, maybe let's do a quick rebrand, or let's do whatever. And like just go out and talk to your customers, and figure out, like, are you providing what you think you're providing? Do they have the problems that you think they are having? And this is really cool for me to say. We do the same thing, right? Like, we only found out recently, or like we only did a true positioning exercise recently when we launched our new product in 2024, and we went through all of the reviews that we got. We went through a whole bunch of like support conversations just to figure out, like, what words do people use when they describe what they like about our product. So for example, for our product, like, do they actually talk more about the speed, or the easiness, or how good it looks? And you have preconceptions about your own business, maybe you as well, that, like, Matthew, that they think, like, oh, you think you're providing them hours, but instead they are looking for your insights, or maybe they're just interested in the way that you automate their marketing, or whatever. Like, that you think you're delivering one thing, and actually they think they're getting this other thing. And just, you won't find that out if you just don't go into the market and actually talk to your customers. So I think that would be my second
So true.
advice, just get out of the building, and yeah, just put it
Yeah.
out there, and just talk to people.
Perfect. That's so important. Yeah, and so many of my clients, they're in their engineering world, and they're engineering the right thing, but they don't ever talk. Well, they don't find out until it's too late that they're really going to talk
Yeah.
to far more users, because really the minimum, like we've all read the books, but the minimum viable product might be 10% of what you've already built. We can go out there and sell that and communicate about that and add value
Yeah.
to these customers' lives, but sure, it might not be perfect until you've done 100% of it, but that 10% is going to get that client feedback and create that momentum.
No, 100%. And I've seen this also. Like, what I really liked is that, while interviewing like a lot of these founders who then build like bigger marketplaces, or we know them as bigger, is that many of them actually, like, one that I really liked was an interview with a woman called Sophie. Now blanking on her last name, but she was the first general manager of like Hire.com when they moved to the UK. And actually, I interviewed her for her second company. It's called Whyatt, where they matched students with apprenticeship. And so they had this like form on the website, and it looked all pretty smooth. But the only thing that it did, send an email to her, which they then put into this Excel sheet, and they just had two spreadsheets, like one, like demand on the one side, like supply on the other side. And then they would write an
Perfect.
email back looking like it was automated, because you filled in the form what you want, I need this apprenticeship, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, you get an email like in whatever, a couple hours. And then it was just like the whole team would go, okay, who do we have? Like, they had like printed lists on the walls, like, okay, this, just, faking the product in a way. So they didn't spend
Yeah,
any time building, but you anyway test what is your value proposition. And I think that is maybe what people also like. Of course, they can do it with Sharetribe if they want, but they don't even need to. You can do it with a set of spreadsheets if you want to be really scrappy. So I think that is, yeah, I think that's, people are sometimes over indexing on the product, because actually, and this is not my words, but this is one of the investors called Josh Brainlinger. He's an investor at FJ Labs, which is one of the biggest marketplace investors in the world. They have invested in like 1,100 platform startups. But he said that the product of your marketplace is liquidity. Like, so the actual making the sale, like, it's the network, it's the people that you have on there. It's not the actual software. Like, that's not the product of your marketplace business. So I think that's maybe my last advice. Like, think about it in those terms.
that's great. Love it. So, as a chief marketing officer, what would be, if we think about the overall market and
Mm.
how AI is impacting the world, and how people are communicating? What would you say to other founders and other people in your position to be thinking about over the course of the next 12 months?
Yeah, to be honest, that's a really tough question. I am thinking about that a lot right now, because there's two things happening. Like, one thing, like you said, is the AI. So like, how does it, like, it can be sometimes feel irrational, like that. people demand AI from your product because that is just what people now expect, right? Like the table stakes, even though they're sometimes not able to verbalize what actually they would in your product like need to be AI, but that is just like, what are you doing
Yep.
in AI? And I think the other thing is that coming back, actually, maybe like Andrew Chen, same guy I mentioned before, he just sent out an email a couple of weeks ago. I'm on his newsletter, and he said that like all marketing channels are dead. And I think that is maybe a bit of overstatement, but I do get what he's saying. That I feel that all of the easy marketing things, they are saturated, those channels, and we haven't really seen a new channel come up in that way where there's this all
Mm.
ungained ground. So I think what that means for like marketing specifically is that you need to stand out on more genuine levels, right? Like, because if everything is now, or so much is being like AI produced and it's really good, it's getting better all the time. But I think what is missing is this uniqueness, like this tone of voice, this sort of personality, if you will, of your company. And I think that is like, maybe the marketing advice is just that, like, it's going to be the long term for a while. There's no short wins. There's no shortcuts to wins anymore because there's no new channels being added where just being where the first mover advantage is what gets you to the top. But instead, I think it all comes down to like quality, brand, and like just consistent quality all the time. Like that is, yeah, I feel that we are sort of currently just in the age of no shortcuts when it comes to marketing. It feels like.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. My experience has been very similar. The businesses that take the long-term approach, the one where they actually deploy their personality every week, personality every month, over and over and over time, show up, do the work, put the free content out, and then find whatever is over-indexing and then put advertising dollars behind that. It doesn't sound very clever or scientific, but people have
Yeah.
made, but the thing is, that's why I do webinars every month. That's why I do this podcast. And also, and in my webinars and podcasts, don't ask people to buy stuff. It's
Mm,
okay. Well, is this how, because people will buy off people. And so even though my customers come to me and say, oh, we're a B2B or a B2 enterprise or B2 government, businesses and governments and organizations don't buy things. People buy things. So you need
yeah.
to generate a relationship with somebody. And then, as Google calls it, the messy middle, they become aware of the product or service or idea. And then
Mm,
they're going to float around for anywhere between a month to forever,
mm,
thinking about it or becoming exposed to it. And the more often that we become exposed to an idea, the more normal it seems. And then as people become exposed to the idea, they become normalized. They go, okay, this is something I want to do, or I can do, or I should do, or I need to do. And that's when they dive in and go, okay, well, let's look at Sharetribe. Let's look at building a marketplace because I've had this idea rattling around. Now it's time to do something.
yeah.
So it's you're absolutely right. It's the, I guess, the age of authenticity. Let's coin that phrase.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Um,
No, I think
but
so. Yeah.
when people like that, and very very smart people say, there's no more channels. Well, I think some very, I think government-backed scientists said in, 1902 or something like that, there's no more new inventions available to the world. We've invented everything. So I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure that there'll be another one coming along the line, and
For
we don't know.
sure. Yeah.
Probably nobody saw TikTok coming.
Yeah.
Even though it had its birthplace was musically, it started out as people just doing, you know,
Yeah.
karaoke, and
Yeah.
then we
Yeah.
should probably all
Absolutely.
listen to Gary Vaynerchuk. What's he playing with at the moment?
Yeah. Yeah. I think like maybe the advice then would be to like find out, and I think this is maybe also something that I've learned a couple of years ago, but maybe I wasn't aware of in the beginning of my marketing career, is that the context of is so important. So the context of your business, right? Like, because we all love to see those stories, like, growth hack this, and here is how they were able to 200% their thing. And I think what people often forget is that what is the specific context of your business? Like, social might have worked for this business, but it might not work for yours because your buyer is in a different, like is in a different mindset when they do this. Or
That's right.
and I think that there is definitely like crossbreeding going on, like where something that doesn't seem to apply to the business can still be applied to the other business. But I think you need to understand why did it work for them and not just sort of blindly take over. And I think that was happening for a while in marketing. And, we had like all this data coming in. It was this data driven marketing, and you couldn't make a decision without like running a spreadsheet first. And I think we've also sort of moved away from that. And I think just understanding the context of why a certain growth tactic or why a certain go-to-market strategy works for that business, and then like look at your context and see, okay, maybe it does work. Like what I always like is that social or like virality is usually considered like, that's not something for B2B because that's not how people do. But if you look, for example, at Slack, like it's essentially a chat tool, and like so much of it has the characteristics of like a consumer to consumer tool or like a business to consumer tool, while it is business to business, like what they're doing. And like there's, in that cases, definitely some of these B2C tactics can be applied to the B2B context with their product. But on the other hand, if you're selling payment infrastructure, that's maybe not an applicable one. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and I was talking with a friend of mine, Kirk Drage from Leapsheep. I do webinar. I'm doing a webinar with him tomorrow. By the time this comes out, it would have been some weeks ago. But he talks about building virality into the model.
Mhm.
And so how do people get value out of the product before they have to pay for the
Yeah.
product?
Yeah.
And we see that, Canva and the guys from almost every product, there's almost every product that's gone big quickly is that they've figured out a way for something to be created and shared
Mhm.
before that person who's receiving the sharing and getting value is having to pay money for it. And which of course is characteristics of VC backed businesses because they can
Yeah.
afford like
Yeah. They
Slack.
can
I've got
delay.
Slack
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I don't pay for it,
Okay.
but I've been using it for a year.
Yeah.
So that's one characteristic of businesses that have that cash. So that's interesting how we've just got to, I genuinely believe that, like you were saying earlier, it's that how do you genuinely connect with a person on a values based, and which brings us back to your ownership structure, which sort of
Yeah.
ties this whole conversation together, is that marketing in 2025 and beyond feels like a values conversation. And really, where does those values come from the business organization? Often, I've walked into a lot of businesses and the values and the mission have been on in the lobby, in a plaque, a lot of
Yeah.
dust on it. Nobody's looked at it for 6 months. Nobody
Yeah.
cares because
Yeah.
they're all just trying to get that dollar. And that's
Yeah.
important. We're all here to, obviously make money. Can't
For
buy
sure.
milk
For
with
sure.
good feelings.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's the sort of thing I think that's really is valid, is that, a business like yours has an ownership structure, creates community. And that's probably also the future and the current state of marketing is that values alignment with customers.
Yeah. 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 I believe that. Yeah. At least that seems to be most of our bets. So yeah, I sign up
Well,
for that. Yeah.
I had a friend of mine ask me what the future of marketing is, and I said, look, nobody knows the answer to that. Do what works today.
Yeah, yeah, and I think just in it, like what you said, like just doing it consistently. Like we live in, like I think we live also in the age where we just get told that like everything is a nuisance, and like why would you need to go to the post office? Why do you need to go? So I think we just sort of like generally get maybe. I think it's easier to stand out nowadays by just doing the work and being consistent and doing it every day, because there's just not enough people doing it. That like just that seems to be, sometimes it seems to be enough to stand out as a brand. I think I would start there.
Fantastic. Well, that's a great way for us to finish the conversation. Stewart. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. If there's anybody out there who is considering a marketplace, definitely check out Sharetribe. I've had a look at the platform myself, and some of the case studies and some of the ways that they've helped people take their idea from an idea to, as Sjoerd said, there was multi-millions of dollars, multiple countries, really making a significant impact in the world for themselves and also for their communities. Thanks very much for joining us today, Sjoerd.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a pleasure.
Absolutely. Good on you, mate. Bye for now.
Take care.
All right.